I think what has been most surprising for me is the extent to which growth economics, which is what I talk about in the paper, has in a sense stalled. And it has stalled in not that people are not writing papers. Hundreds of papers are being published. And the sophistication of the papers goes on increasing, perhaps even exponentially, in many ways at the theoretical level, at the empirical level. So people are clearly exercising their minds. But when you look at what is the sort of the value added, the dry matter that you carry away from reading these papers, if you have the fortitude to do so, there's very little. In effect, we are still very much at the stage of saying capital matters, and who in the world would say it doesn't matter, that total factor productivity matters, and yes, that's fantastic. And then we come back and saying, how do we affect total factor productivity? And that then boils down to, oh, you better do some innovation and you better have more skilled people and educate them more. And you take a deep breath and you say, gosh, is that as far as I've gotten? And really, that's as far as we have gotten. So I feel that was, I've been aware of this subliminally because I read about it, but when you sort of sit down and say, okay, is that all? And unfortunately, that's all. Yes, I think recent experience has been both very good and not so good. When I think of the very good experience, I think of China. And I say that I worked on China 30 years, never did we expect this process to continue for so long at the pace at which it did. And it surprised us and surprised everybody else. So that's the good side of it. The not so good side of it is when I look at a country like South Africa, which by all indicators ought to be one of the high performers. It ought to be with the Malaysias, the Thailands of the world. It's a very fortunate country. And it struggles at 2.5%, 3% and so on. And we do not have good answers. We can clearly see the problems. They are blindingly obvious. And yet, development economics struggles to try and come up with anything that is by way of convincing political economy arguments, because that's what it is. And so the huge gap is between development economics as it is theorized and done, and the political economy of actually converting what we do in development into something that's practical policy for the South Africans. We have no idea what to do with the Chinas. One is climate change, and particularly tropical countries, unfortunately the most populous. So that coping with that will require not just lots of capital, but lots of brain power and lots of political fortitude, and I don't know whether that's there. The second thing is that in the medium term, unemployment and all that it implies in terms of dashed expectations, lost capital, human capital, that will be a huge issue, and that's also going to test governments. And I think it will test governments in ways that will exacerbate unemployment. And the third, again, fairly obvious, is aging. And what it will mean, in the way I think about it, is not just the sort of the social burdens, but also what it means for global savings rates and global surpluses, which I think will be eaten away in this process, which also means to me that the few globally surplus countries like China and so on will not be able to support the needs of other countries. So you'll have lots of demands out there, in this, that, and the other. You will have less capital, and sadly that means slower growth.